I want to start today by telling you about a woman named Marjorie. She was 71 years old. She'd worked 38 years as a school cafeteria manager in Dayton, Ohio, and she came into my office on a Tuesday afternoon in the fall, clutching a manila folder against her chest, like it was the only thing holding her upright. She sat down across from my desk, and before I could even offer her a cup of coffee, she asked me a question I have never forgotten. She looked at me, and she said, "Is it true that they might just cut my check one day, and there's nothing I can do about it?" And I had to sit with that question for a moment, because Marjorie had heard something on the news, something half-explained and frightening, and she'd carried that fear around for weeks before she finally found someone to ask. What she was really asking me was whether the promise she'd paid into for almost 4 decades was about to be broken. And here's what nobody had told Marjorie. Nobody had told her that the fear she was feeling was rooted in something real, but that the story was far more complicated and honestly far more hopeful than the scary headlines she'd caught in passing. Because right now, as I'm recording this, Congress is finally moving on Social Security in a way it has not moved in over 40 years. There are real bills with real numbers attached sitting in committees in Washington this year. Some of them would raise your check. Some of them would change the age you can collect. Some of them would touch the taxes taken out of a working person's paycheck. And almost none of it is being explained to the people it will affect most, which is you. So I told Marjorie what I'm about to tell you, and by the time she left my office that afternoon, she was standing a little straighter. Let me walk you through everything I told her. If we haven't met before, my name is Emma Smith, and I've spent more than 15 years as a state bar licensed estate attorney, sitting across the desk from people exactly like Marjorie. I've read the letters the Social Security Administration sends out, the ones written in that dense government language that seems almost designed to be misunderstood. And I want to be completely honest with you about something right at the start, because trust matters more to me than anything else on this channel. I do not work for the government. I don't sell insurance. I don't earn a single dime based on what any bill in Congress does or doesn't do, and nobody is paying me to steer you toward one position or another. I'm making this video because I've watched too many good, hardworking people spend their retirement years afraid of a system they paid into their whole lives, simply because no one ever sat them down and explained it plainly. That's the whole reason I'm here. In 15 years of this work, I've noticed a pattern that troubles me deeply, and it's this. The biggest decisions about your retirement money are made in rooms you will never see, using language that was never meant for you to understand, and then the consequences are quietly mailed to your kitchen table years later. When Congress debates Social Security, the conversation happens in hearings most people never watch, using phrases like trust fund solvency and actuarial balance, and the 75-year shortfall. Those phrases are technically accurate, and they are also perfectly designed to make a normal person's eyes glaze over and change the channel. And I think that's part of the problem, honestly. When something feels too complicated to understand, most people just decide not to think about it at all. And that's exactly how you end up with a woman like Marjorie sitting in my office, terrified of a headline she couldn't fully parse. So my job today is to translate. I'm going to take what's actually happening in Washington right now and put it in plain kitchen table English. Let me give you the lay of the land before we get into the specific changes, because you need the context to understand why any of this is happening at all. Social Security is what's called a pay-as-you-go program, which is a fancy way of saying the money coming out of today's workers' paychecks is what pays today's retirees. For a long time, more money was coming in than going out, and the extra piled up in what we call the trust funds. But the country has gotten older. Back in 1960, there were 5 workers paying in for every 1 person collecting benefits. Today, that ratio is about 3 to 1, and it's still falling. People are living longer and drawing benefits for more years than ever before. And so those trust fund reserves that piled up for decades are now being drawn down. That is the entire reason Congress is suddenly paying attention, and it's the reason Marjorie heard something scary on the news. Now let me tell you the 5 things that could actually change, and what each one would mean for the money in your account. The first thing I wish I could have told Marjorie years ago, before she ever got scared, is this. There is a date at the center of this entire conversation, and once you understand that date, everything else clicks into place. According to the 2026 Social Security Trustees Report, the Primary Retirement Trust Fund, the one called Old Age and Survivors Insurance, is now projected to be depleted in the 4th quarter of 2032. That's about 3 months earlier than they projected the year before. Now I need you to hear the next part very carefully, because this is exactly where people get frightened for the wrong reason. Depletion does not mean the checks stop. It does not mean Social Security disappears. It does not mean the money is gone. What it means is that if Congress does absolutely nothing between now and then, the program would only be able to pay out what's currently coming in from payroll taxes. And here's what that would actually look like at your kitchen table. If nothing changes, the program would be able to pay roughly 78% of scheduled retirement benefits starting in 2032. If you combine that retirement fund with the disability fund, the combined picture pushes the date to 2034, at which point about 83% of benefits would still be payable. So the worst-case do-nothing scenario is not zero. It's a cut of around 22%. Let me put a real dollar figure on that so it stops being an abstraction. The Bipartisan Policy Center estimates that an across-the-board cut would cost a married couple of average earners roughly $10,560 a year. That's real money off a real kitchen table. But, and I want you to hold on to this, that is the scenario where Congress does nothing. And the whole reason I'm making this video is that, for the first time in 40 years, Congress is actually starting to do something. That's the second thing I saw in that same conversation with Marjorie, and it's the reason her shoulders relaxed. The second thing I told Marjorie is that the single biggest obstacle to fixing Social Security has never really been a shortage of ideas. It's been a shortage of the political will to actually vote on any of them. In 15 years, I've watched dozens of thoughtful proposals get introduced, get a nice press release, and then quietly die in a committee drawer because nobody wanted to be the one to cast a hard vote. So the most important development happening right now isn't a specific dollar change at all. It's a change to the process itself. This year, a bipartisan group of senators introduced something called the PROMISE Act. That stands for Protecting Retirement Opportunities and Maintaining Income Security for Everyone. And what it does is fascinating because it doesn't pick a winner. It creates a legislative machine that forces Congress to actually debate and vote on a solvency plan, instead of letting the ideas rot in a drawer. The senators behind it are a genuinely mixed bunch, which tells you something. You've got Dick Durbin, a Democrat from Illinois, alongside Bill Cassidy, a Republican from Louisiana, John Cornyn of Texas, Tim Kaine of Virginia, Angus King of Maine, and Thom Tillis of North Carolina. Under this bill, an independent bipartisan panel called the Social Security Advisory Board would gather public input, including from ordinary people like you, and then send Congress a starting bill. Any plan they send would have to keep Social Security solvent for at least 50 years. Then it goes to the tax writing committees, then to the floor for 100 hours of debate, and any final fix would need 60 votes in the Senate to pass. There's a companion effort in the House, too, called the Bipartisan Social Security Commission Act, led by Tom Cole of Oklahoma and Tom Suozzi of New York, which would build a 13-member commission that has to produce a 75-year solvency plan approved by at least 9 of its 13 members. And here's the part I want you to sit with for a second, because it's the part almost nobody in the news mentions. Both of these bills are designed so that a fix cannot be jammed through by one party alone. Now, the third thing I told Marjorie is the one that made her actually smile, and it's the one I think surprises people the most. Because so much of the coverage you hear focuses on cuts and shortfalls, most folks have no idea that there are serious bills in Congress right now that would raise their monthly check. One of the most talked about is the Social Security Expansion Act, which was reintroduced by a group including Senator Bernie Sanders and Senator Elizabeth Warren, along with House members like Representative Val Hoyle. And the headline number on that bill is one I want you to remember. It would increase benefits by an estimated $200 a month for current and new recipients. $200 a month works out to $2,400 a year. For a lot of the people I've worked with over the years, an extra $2,400 a year is not a rounding error. It's the difference between filling a prescription and skipping it. It's the property tax bill. It's the gap that keeps somebody in their own home instead of moving in with their kids. Now, I have to be straight with you, the same way I was straight with Marjorie, because that's the only way I know how to do this. That bill has been introduced. It has real sponsors and real momentum in certain corners of Congress. But it has not passed. It is a proposal, not a law, and I would be doing you a disservice if I let you walk away thinking that extra $200 is already on its way to your mailbox. It isn't, not yet. This is the single most important idea I hope you take from this entire video, so let me say it plainly. Being eligible for something, or being named in a bill that would help you, is not the same as receiving it. There is always a gap between what's proposed in Washington and what actually lands in your bank account. And that gap is exactly where you have to pay attention. The way you close that gap is not by hoping. It's by knowing what's happening and making your voice heard while these decisions are still being made. And I'll tell you exactly how to do that a little later, because it's easier than most people think. The fourth thing I explained to Marjorie is where the money to fix any of this would actually come from. Because you can't have a serious conversation about raising checks or extending the trust fund without talking about revenue. And this is where one of the most surprising alliances in Washington comes in. This year, Senator Elizabeth Warren, a Democrat from Massachusetts, and Senator Bernie Moreno, a Republican from Ohio, wrote a joint opinion piece together proposing a specific fix. Now, if you know anything about those two, you know they don't agree on much. So when they put their names on the same idea, people paid attention. Their proposal centers on something called the payroll tax cap. And I want to explain exactly what that is because most people have never heard of it, and it affects the math for all of us. Here's how it works today. That 6.2% Social Security tax that comes out of your paycheck and the matching 6.2% your employer pays only applies to your wages up to a certain ceiling. For 2026, that ceiling is $184,500. Every single dollar a person earns above that amount is completely exempt from Social Security tax. So somebody earning a comfortable middle-class salary pays the tax on every dollar they make, while somebody earning several $million a year stops paying into Social Security sometime in the first few weeks of January. When the program was designed, the cap was set so that about 90% of all covered wages in the country were taxed. But wages at the very top have grown so much faster than everyone else's that today only about 83% of covered earnings fall under that cap. The Warren-Moreno idea, and similar ideas in other bills, would apply the tax to very high earners again, generating new revenue for the program. Whether you think that's the right fix is genuinely up to you and your values, and I'm not here to tell you how to vote. But you deserve to understand the mechanism because it's the lever almost every serious solvency plan pulls in one way or another. And I want to add one honest caveat here, because I promised you plain truth and not cheerleading. Even the experts who study this for a living disagree about whether lifting the cap alone would fully solve the problem. Some independent analysts have pointed out that a cap-only fix might extend the program's finances for a while and then run into deficits again down the road, unless it's paired with other changes. Other analysts argue it's the fairest and most straightforward option available. My point in telling you this is not to confuse you. It's to make sure you understand that there is no magic single answer that everyone agrees on. Anyone who tells you the fix is simple and obvious is either selling something or hasn't read the fine print. The real solution, if we get one, will almost certainly be a package, a combination of several changes stacked together. And that brings me to the fifth thing, which is the one Marjorie found the hardest to hear. Before I get to that fifth change, I want to tell you about a second client, because his situation taught me something that Marjorie's didn't. His name was Warren, no relation to the senator, and he was a 62-year-old man from a small town outside Chattanooga, Tennessee. Warren had spent his whole career doing physically demanding work: roofing, framing, concrete, the kind of work that wears a body down long before the calendar says you're old. He came to me because he was trying to decide whether to start collecting his Social Security early, at 62, or wait. And in the middle of our conversation, he said something that stuck with me. He said, "Emma, my knees are shot. I physically cannot do this job until I'm 67, let alone longer. If they raise the age on me now, that's not a policy change. That's my whole retirement." And Warren was pointing at something real, something the people who design these policies in air-conditioned offices sometimes forget. A change that looks small on a spreadsheet, like raising the retirement age by a year or two, doesn't land the same way on everybody. For an accountant who loves his desk job, working a couple more years might be no big deal at all. For a man whose body is the tool he's worked with for 40 years, it can be the difference between a dignified retirement and a painful one. I couldn't change the law for Warren, but I could make sure he understood exactly how the current rules worked and exactly what any proposed change would mean for his specific situation and his specific body, so he could make the smartest possible decision with the cards he was actually holding. And that's what I want to do for you with this fifth and final change. The fifth change, the one Warren was so worried about, is the proposal to raise the full retirement age. This is the quietest of all the changes we've discussed, and in some ways it's the most consequential, because it works like a benefit cut without ever being called one. Let me explain the current setup first. For anyone born in 1960 or later, the full retirement age is already 67. That's the age at which you can collect your complete, unreduced benefit. You can start as early as 62, but if you do, your monthly check is permanently reduced. And if you wait past your full retirement age, all the way up to 70, your check actually grows. That's the system as it stands today. Now, several solvency proposals on the table would gradually push that full retirement age higher, to 68, and in some versions all the way to 69. Here's why I call it a quiet cut. Raising the full retirement age doesn't take a dollar off the printed benefit amount. What it does is make you wait longer to get that full amount, or accept a bigger permanent reduction if you can't wait. One analysis from the Center for American Progress looked at a proposal to raise the age from 67 to 69, phased in 3 months per year, and found it would amount to benefit cuts of thousands of dollars a year for affected workers over the course of their retirement. The Social Security Administration's own actuaries have modeled versions where the age climbs 1 month every 2 years until it reaches 68. Now, most of these proposals are designed to phase in slowly and to affect younger workers, not people already collecting or near collecting. So if you're already receiving benefits today, a change like this most likely would not touch your current check. But if you have children or grandchildren, this is the change that would land squarely on them, and it's the one I'd want them to understand. So if you take nothing else away from everything I've laid out today, I want it to be this one thing. The story that Marjorie was afraid of, the story that the checks might just stop with nothing she could do about it, was not the real story. The real story is that Social Security faces a genuine deadline in the early 2030s, and for the first time in a generation, Congress is actually building the machinery to deal with it. Some of the ideas on the table would help you, like the $200 a month increase. Some would raise revenue by touching the very top of the income scale, like lifting that $184,500 cap. And some would quietly ask future retirees to work longer. Not one of these has become law yet. They are all still proposals, still being shaped, still open to influence. And that, right there, is the most important part, because it means this is one of those rare moments where paying attention actually matters. I told Warren the same thing I told Marjorie, and it's the same thing I'm telling you. The worst position to be in is the one where these decisions get made about your retirement, in rooms you never saw, and you find out about the consequences years later when it's too late to do anything but adjust. The far better position is the one where you understand what's on the table, you know which changes would help you and which would hurt you, and you make your voice count while the clay is still soft. Because here's the thing about all of these bills. Every single one of them includes a step where lawmakers listen, at least on paper, to what the public is saying. The Promise Act literally builds in a public input process. Your representatives count the calls and letters they receive on Social Security. This is not a case where you're powerless. It's a case where most people simply don't realize how much attention this decision deserves until it's already been decided. Now, I don't want to leave you with just the big picture, because plain understanding is only half the job. The other half is knowing what you can actually do about any of this, in concrete terms, this week, if you want to. So let me give you the practical steps, the same way I'd sketch them out on a legal pad for a client sitting across my desk. And I want to be clear before I do, because this is a sensitive topic and the rules genuinely can change. Before you make any big decision about when to claim your own benefits or how any of this affects your specific situation, please verify the current details with the Social Security Administration directly or with a licensed professional who can look at your full picture. What I'm giving you here is a map, not a substitute for personalized advice on your own numbers. Step 1 is simply to know your own numbers, because you cannot judge how any of these changes would affect you if you don't know your own baseline. Go to the official Social Security website, which is ssa.gov, and set up what's called your personal My Social Security account. It's free, and it lets you see your own estimated benefit at different claiming ages, your full earnings history, and your projected full retirement age based on your birth year. I've had so many clients who were making major life decisions based on a number they half remembered or an amount a neighbor mentioned over the fence. Don't do that. Get your actual figures from the actual source. When you can see your own real benefit at 62, at your full retirement age, and at 70, all these abstract policy debates suddenly become concrete and personal, and you'll immediately understand which of the 5 changes we discussed would matter most to your life. Step 2 is to make your voice heard while these bills are still being shaped. and this is far easier than most people assume. You can find out who your 2 U.S. senators and your 1 U.S. representative are in about 30 seconds online, and every one of them has both a phone number and a simple contact form on their official website. You do not need to be an expert. You don't need to use fancy language. You can call the office and simply tell the staffer who answers that you're a constituent, you're paying attention to the Social Security bills in Congress, and here's what matters to you and your family. Those calls genuinely get tallied. In 15 years, I've spoken with enough congressional staff to tell you that a wave of calls from real constituents on a specific issue does register in a way that 1,000 anonymous internet comments never will. This is the single most direct lever an ordinary person has, and almost nobody pulls it. Step 3, and this one is about protecting yourself, because anytime there's confusion and fear around Social Security, the scammers come out in force. I have seen a spike in fraud every single time Social Security is in the headlines, and this moment is no exception. So please burn this into your memory. The Social Security Administration will never call you out of the blue to threaten you, to say your benefits are suspended, or to demand that you confirm your Social Security number, your bank details, or make a payment in gift cards or wire transfers to fix some urgent problem. That is always, 100% of the time, a scam. The real agency communicates major matters by mail, and you can always hang up and call the official number yourself to verify anything. With all this legislative talk in the news, you may hear people claiming they can get you a special benefit increase for a fee, or asking you to sign up for a program to lock in the new law. Ignore them completely. There is no fee to influence legislation, and nobody legitimate will ask you for one. Step 4 is about the people you love, and it flows directly from Warren's story. If the change that worries you most is the retirement age, remember that the people it would hit hardest are younger, your children, and your grandchildren. So one of the most valuable things you can do is have a real conversation with them about it. A lot of younger folks have simply written off Social Security in their minds, assuming it won't be there for them, which is both inaccurate and exactly the kind of resignation that lets bad policy slide through unnoticed. When you explain to them what's actually happening, that the program isn't disappearing but is being actively reshaped right now, you turn them from resigned bystanders into people who might actually pick up the phone and call their own representative. And that matters, because the decisions being made this year will land on their retirement far more heavily than on yours. Step 5 ties everything together, and it's about timing, which is the whole reason this video is worth your time right now rather than someday. The trust fund deadline in the early 2030s means Congress genuinely feels pressure to act in the next few years, not a decade from now. The bills we talked about, the Promise Act, the Commission proposals, the Expansion Act, the payroll cap ideas, are live and moving in this session. That means the window where public input can shape the outcome is open right now, and it will not stay open forever. Once a fix is negotiated, passed, and signed, the terms are locked in for a very long time, the way the last major fix in 1983 shaped the system for the next 40 years. So the practical takeaway is simply this: don't treat this as a someday problem. Treat it as a this-year opportunity to understand your own numbers, to make one phone call and to talk to your family, while your voice can still make a difference. Now, I know I've just handed you a lot to hold in your head at once: 5 different changes, a handful of bill names, income limits, a couple of key dates, and a to-do list. And I don't expect anyone to remember all of it from a single video. So I did what I always do for my own clients. I put it all in writing, in plain language, in one place you can actually use. I've created a free, simple guide called the Social Security Change Tracker, and it lays out all 5 of the developments we covered today on a single page in plain English, with the current dollar figures, the key dates, and a short checklist of the exact steps to take, including how to set up your My Social Security account and how to reach your representatives. There's no cost, and I don't ask for anything in return except your email so I can send it to you and let you know if these bills move. You can grab it at the link in the description below, which is yourname.kit.com/checklist. Print it out, stick it on the fridge, and you'll have the whole picture in front of you whenever the news brings this up again. And before you go, I want to ask you to do one gentle thing. Not for me, but for someone in your own life. Think for a moment about the Marjorie you know. Everyone has one. The friend, the sister, the neighbor across the fence who has been quietly carrying around a fear about Social Security that she picked up from a scary headline and never had anyone to talk it through with. Or think about the Warren you know, the one with the worn-out body who's terrified about the retirement age. Those are exactly the people this video was made for, and they're the ones least likely to ever go searching for it on their own. So if anything I said today gave you a little more clarity or took the edge off of fear you've been carrying, please pass this along to them. Send them the link, or better yet, sit down and watch it together over a cup of coffee, the way Marjorie and I talked it through in my office. Sometimes the most protective thing you can do for someone you love is simply make sure they're not facing something confusing alone. And if you'd like me to keep walking you through this as it unfolds, because believe me, this story is going to keep developing over the coming months, I'd be honored to have you subscribe to the channel and tap the little bell so you don't miss it when one of these bills actually moves. This is my life's work, sitting down with good people and translating the complicated things that affect their money and their peace of mind. I'm so glad you spent this time with me today. Take care of yourself, take care of the people you love, and remember, you have more power in this than anyone ever told you. I'll see you in the next one.